getting back to the anger condition, that was linked to social manipulations. So the student leads through the questionnaire, and at first he expresses his annoyance at how long the questionnaire is. Again, it was 5 pages. Then in question 7 of the questionnaire, they are asking, list the foods you would eat in a typical day, to which the student angrily responds, oh, for Pete's sake, what did I have for breakfast this morning? Alright? Again, all relatable, like, he is making comments that are, relatable, and the participant himself is likely to think as well. Then question 9, they ask, do you ever hear bells, and how often? The student remarks, look at question 9. How ridiculous can you get? I hear bells every time I change classes again. And then there is question 17, which asks them his father's annual average income. And the student says, this really irritates me. It is none of their business what my father makes, so he leaves it blank. He's saying it all out loud. Then question 25, this is a long one, so if you do not remember this, like during the question, it's alright, you can keep track of a few of the shorter ones personally. So question 25, there's a series of long series of items such as does not bathe or wash regularly, seems to me it's like yeah with care, etc., etc. And these items under which you have to write down a member of their family or a relative to which this item seems most applicable, and there was no option to say like no one. So you had to pick someone from your immediate family that was like most suitable for psychiatric care and does not bathe or wash regularly. Again, quite insulting assumptions and made more frustrating by the fact that you have no choice. Then he gets asked a question about childhood diseases, and the student says he can't remember what he had, especially at that age. Yeah. Again, the ridiculousness. Then he is asked quite a personal question. Says, how many times each week do you have sexual intercourse? 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So the student angrily bites out that he's not gonna tell them all of this. Again, so very personal question. At this point, the participant is again probably feeling irritated. So the student sits sullenly for a few moments, and then he violently rips his questionnaire into pieces, and he's like, I'm not wasting my time on this, I'm getting my books and leave. And shortly after a while, he storms out of the room. Now, the student does leave, but there is still time for the experimenter to come in. So there are 8 more questions that the participant leaves through, and the last question, again, another offensive one, asks, how many men, other than your father, has your mother had extramarital relationships? So there's an option for 4 and under, 5 to 9, and 10 and above. So note that they have given an option for 4 and under, not 0, which is a subtle implication that your mother must have cheated on your father. Again, quite insulting. This would make anyone angry, as is the name of the condition. So then, again, the experimenter then returns. It is important to note that the stooge in both of the social conditions, the euphoria and anger, was blind to the participant's condition. So the stooge did not know if the participant was from epi-ignored, epi-informed, epi-misinformed, or placebo. And you can imagine why this was important, because, for example, if the student knew that the participant was, for example, from the epinephrine-informed condition, so he would virtually have no evaluative needs, then he would not put a lot of effort into his performance, and he would say, for example, well, this guy's not even gonna have any effect no matter what I do, so he might not be as accurate and energetic. So it was important that the student not know any of their conditions or the experimental group. So the epinephrine, again, this is a visualization of what it might look like. Note that the epinephrine misinformed condition was not made to go through the anger situation. The misinformed condition was again only used as a way to control against the appropriateness of the explanation, and It was not necessary to put it through both social situations because the results from its euphoria condition alone would hopefully suffice. So now we go on to data measurement or collection. So data was collected by using an observation. So it was a covert observation because they were observed through a one-way mirror. It was a non-participant observation because those people who were observing, they were not part of the social setting. It was controlled because not only was the social situation manipulated by using a stooge, they were also in an artificial setting, the laboratory. And it was also structured because the behaviors were observed by using a structured behavioral checklist. The second measure is self-report, in which on a variety of rating scale questions, the subject would indicate his mood at the moment. Such measures can be considered public indices of mood because they would be available to the experimenter and his associates. Note that the offensive questionnaire in the anger condition is not counted as self-report because those answers, like the experimenters wouldn't even look at them, not only because they were personal, because they add no value whatsoever to your research. So those answers were completely ignored, so you can perhaps see this as a maintenance of privacy. So this is how we scored the observation. So essentially you're seeing the categories of behavior that were clearly defined in the behavioral checklist. So in the euphoria condition, there are 4 categories. For each of the stooges, 14 units. Again, we divided the stooges' performance in 14 short units, so it was easy to rate and observe each one. So each one was rated. So category 1 says the participant joins in the activity. So it could look something like he also made paper airplanes, threw paper basketballs, slingshots. Category 2 is the participant initiates new activity. So he could, for example, jump up and dance on the table, hurl paper basketballs at other people, threw open the window, laughing. Third is if the participant wholly ignores the presence or the actions of the stooge. And fourth is if he simply watches the stooge but does not join in. Now again, to have inter-observer reliability, two observers independently coded 2 of the experimental sessions. And the observers agreed on 88% of the 14 units on these 2 sessions. So that is a pretty high rate of inter-observer reliability. Now, the anger condition was scored in a slightly different manner. So there were 6 categories in which behavior was scored. So if participant agreed with the stooge, it would be rated +2. For example, when the student said it's none of their business what his father's annual income is, so subject could say like, I agree, I don't see the point in telling them this. Or disagreement could be like, hey, maybe they think it's important information, we don't know. So if disagreed, it was a -2. Then the second category is if the participant initiates agreement or disagreement. So if the participant, without prompting from the students themselves, says this is either unorthodox or something like that. Or third category is neutral. So participant is non-committal and he's neither very interested nor disinterested. And that would be rated with a 0. Fourth, if the participant is completely ignoring. Now why the ignoring is -1 while watching is 0 is because ignoring such a performance shows a negative vantage, shows that you are subtly disagreeing with these two. Fifth category is if the participant is only watching. Again, watching is 0 and not +1, as you would think by looking at this, is because sometimes you watch that doesn't necessarily mean you approve or agree with something. And here again, the inter-observer reliability was 71% because 2 of these observers scored all the unit-by-unit comparisons of 2 experimental conditions. Now we move on to the self-report questions. So when the subject session with the stooge was completed, the experimenter then returned to the room. They again took the pulse rate. This is an important quantitative measure of physiological arousal. So if you remember, we took the pulse rate right before the adrenaline had been injected, and now we are taking the pulse rate again right after the Stooges' performance had finished. So the experimenter told the subjects that before they proceed with the vision test, there is another kind of information they need. So they want to look at the effects of this supposed reciproxin on mood, irritability, fatigue, hunger, etc. So they gave them a few filler questionnaires about hunger, fatigue, etc., and then to measure the mood or the emotional state, which is again what we want to measure. They contain two crucial questions. The first question was, how irritated, angry, or annoyed you feel at the present? And it ranged from 0 to 4, so it was a 5-point scale. So 0 said, I don't feel at all irritated or angry. The 1 said, I feel a little irritated or angry. 2 said, I feel quite. 3 said, feel very irritated or angry. And 4 said, I feel extremely irritated or angry. And it is again echoed in the second question, which asks how good or happy you would say you feel at the present. So 0 again, not at all, little, quite, very, and 4 is extremely. To measure the physical effects of epinephrine and determine whether or not the injection had been successful in producing physiological arousal or the required bodily state that would make them have evaluative needs, the following questions were then asked. Have you experienced any palpitations? So it's ranged from a scale of 0 to 3, so not at all, a slight amount, a moderate amount, and an intense amount. And did you feel any tremors? So again, not at all, slight, moderate, intense. And then we wanted to measure the possible effects of the wrong instructions or the wrong side effects that we gave to the epinephrine misinformed. So we asked them if they felt any numbness in their feet, itching sensations, or headache. Obviously, we would expect they did not feel any of these side effects because they are no side effects that accompany a dosage of epinephrine. So all of these questions also had a 4-point rating scale, so from 0 to 3, so not at all to very intense. In addition to these scales, participants were supposed to answer a few open-ended questions on physical or emotional sensations, and the pulse rate was also measured, so that was a quantitative measure of bodily state again. So after the questionnaires were completed, the experimenters thoroughly announced the true aim, they explained their role, and they debriefed them and let them go. And they swore them to secrecy. Now, why this is important in psychological research is because if they spread bad word about the research, then other people would be less likely to join in as participants in the future, and they may misinterpret or disregard the findings of the study. There were 11 subjects, however, that were incredibly suspicious of the two crucial questions that we asked right here. So those participants' data was immediately removed from the total database because we are certain that their answers previously would not be very accurate. So now there is a small evaluation of the experiment's design. So we do know that an appropriate explanation was given to those whom we gave the correct side effects. However, we cannot be certain that an appropriate explanation was not devised on their own by the epinephrine ignorant condition. So the epinephrine ignorant condition received an injection, right, but no explanation. They could very easily come to this conclusion on their own that their physiological arousal is due to them having received an unknown injection. It is a very easy theory to come to. So you're basically saying that not telling them the side effects does not prevent the lack of evaluative needs, does not prevent an appropriate explanation being provided to them. These are known as our self-informed participants. And secondly, the proposition that given the same cognitive circumstances, evaluative needs would arise only as much as physiological arousal was present. So this is for the placebo group. So while the adrenaline injection was 100% successful in producing the required bodily state, the placebo or the saline solution obviously did not stop them from having natural physiological arousal on their own. So some participants might have experienced physiological arousal on their own because it was a very intense situation to be in if you put yourself in that. So again, to summarize, subjects will attribute feelings to injection, thus providing their subjects with an appropriate explanation all on their own. Second is placebo does not prevent physiological arousal, so this weakens the difference between our placebo group and our epinephrine group. So now we move on to results and discussions of this study. So this table shows us the effects of the injections on the bodily state. So this is basically measuring the physiological arousal. I do not believe you need to remember quite so much of data. You can just learn the fact that which group had the most or least change in pulse rate in which condition, and you can also note the fact that none of the participants, including the epinephrine misinformed participants, indicated that they had any of the fake symptoms that were provided to them. So you can note here that all of the epinephrine injections were successful in producing the required bodily state, and the placebo again did not experience an increase in either pulse rate or both anger and euphoria. Neither did they also experience the lowest palpitations or tremors. And all the subjects in the epinephrine group show considerably more evidence of sympathetic activation than the subjects in placebo conditions. So again, these are just mean scores of the 0 to 3 ratings that they had given in the rating scale questions. Examination shows that subjects in the epinephrine condition were indeed, so these are the 3 people that were in the epinephrine condition. So epinephrine condition were indeed in a state of physiological arousal. The epinephrine injection did not work with equal effectiveness for, however, all subjects. This can be attributed to either, I believe, participant variables. And the epinephrine misinformed, again, does not vary on the answers of these fake symptoms than the other people. So it's all pretty much the same for all of them.